I'm Zoe.
And I'm Ben.
And this is our new podcast, Penny in the Landline.
Yes, it is. Very exciting. I'm so excited to start.
Me too. This is our first episode.
So
We're starting our little podcast. Ben, would you like to tell everyone why and how we know each other?
Yeah, so we met at university through mutual friends. And we just got along super well. And we have very similar interests and attitudes. We go on like a house on fire.
Yes, and because of that, we, amongst much like many other people our age, decided that we'd be great in a podcast together because we make each other laugh and we find ourselves very, very funny and intelligent.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Like, everyone in our generation thinks that everyone wants to hear our opinion.
Exactly.
So now, why not? You know, I think everyone else has one. Why can't we have one too?
Yes, we're here to document our early 20s together through audio formats.
Yeah.
So, yes,
Exactly.
that is what we're doing here.
Time flies, and one day this will be really valuable to, hopefully not just to us, but to other people.
Yes,
You never know.
yes.
So in terms of the title, a bit of a rogue one. There's nothing more, personally, as young as this makes us sound, there's nothing more entertaining than phoning someone on a landline,
Yes.
on a corded phone.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of just, ringing your friend up and just talking and talking and talking. There's no social media, there's no texting, it's just literal just phoning a friend.
Exactly.
Hanging out.
That's the way. And being cordoned off, being sectioned off to one location in the house to be able to call a friend is a very important aspect.
Exactly, and these days I think we are so distracted by so many things happening to us at once, like the idea of just doing one thing, of being stuck in just one place where you can only put your attention into one person and one activity is very much like a lost thing, and it's something that is really fun, and we want to kind of, bring us back to this this kind of period of time. And, and in terms of putting the penny element of the landline, being a little mama's boy, my mother said that when she was growing up, her and her best friend used to call so often on their landlines after school that her mum put in a literal toll box on the landline. So my mum had to literally pay 20p for every single time that she wanted to call her friend, as a means of kind of like stopping her from doing it. And it didn't stop her. My mum just spent all her money calling her friend, and
so sweet.
I just think that's really nice and sweet and cute, and we take for granted communication these days, and this is just a fun way to hang out and share that with other people. And
Yes, exactly. That's exactly the vibe that we're trying to go with, and just us two talking from our floors, twirling the little cords, except we're on our laptops and I have a fancy mic. But we're pretending.
Exactly. It's like class-tourism. Like, here we are with our MacBooks, pretending we're just talking on a landline, when actually we're not. We're using a BT internet.
Trying to get back to that vibe. We're trying to find a simulacra of that. That's probably not how I use that word. I learned it probably a week ago. We'll keep moving on.
I don't know what that means.
It's a pretty good one. It's a pretty good word. We're not just going to be chatting. Of course, both Ben and I are quite type A, so we decided we needed a specific structure to our conversation here with you today. So our idea was that each of us, for each week that we do this for, we were each going to bring a topic that we haven't discussed prior with the other person, because we tend to talk a lot, and this is just another time for us to pick each other's brains and bring a strange and random topic for us to dissect together.
Look, if there's one thing I have in the world, it's an opinion. I have an opinion. No one asked the opinion, but I have one.
Exactly.
And what better way to put that into the world than through a podcast?
Yes.
And with my bestie,
and with
easy peasy.
my technical knowledge, this will be launched throughout the digital ecosystem for everyone to experience through the sound waves.
Yes.
So
exactly.
We've each brought our special topic, and I think you shall do the honors of starting us off. What is your topic for today, Ben?
Okay. So the topic I bring onto the table today, Zoe, is the concept. Okay, I love a concept. So the concept of reading a book. Okay.
Yep.
Here we are, people in our early 20s, and I don't know about you, but I love to tell everyone how often I read. It's something I really loved. It's a really arrogant thing about me. I love to be like, oh, what do you do? I like to be like, oh, I read a book.
Yep.
What comes into that kind of discussion of the topic is also, are any of us really reading as much as we claim we are?
Yes.
Because I think we all like to, because obviously reading is such a, revered and academic and intelligent practice. I mean, I, for one, definitely don't read as much as I claim I do. But I like to make out as such an intrinsic part of my personality is that I read. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on reading.
That's very funny because we've been in a very bookish vibe recently because we went to see Dolly Alderton last week.
Yes, we did. Yes, that's
which
right.
Which is super fun.
That is right.
Right before recording this podcast, we were talking about her new book, Good Material. But I actually, this year has been like my reading era, let's say, because after high school, after we had to stop, reading books for class, didn't need to read anymore. Just, that's how it was. But something about this last year, I don't know. I've got a whole little library now, good little collection, romance books, fiction books. I've got everything. I've got like financial advice books. I got a book about birds.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? You say about reading in your 20s and reading outside of a school setting. Mm-hmm. It is one of those things that I think like you do just so typically associate with school and academics and kind of have been forced to do it.
Yeah.
Whereas reality is like, it's actually a really fun thing to do, but also it's actually quite especially I think for our generation of people, when it's so easy to get entertainment through screens and our phones and media, it's actually kind of like an active thing.
Yes.
Whereas everything else it comes with in terms of entertainment is so passive. Mm-hmm. Like it's so easy to sit there and just let TikToks play on your phone over and over and over again, but to actually sit down and invest yourself in someone's writing, it sounds really lazy, but it actually takes effort. And I think that's something that I have to actually, like, people from the 50s would be like, oh my god, this is so dystopian. But the idea of like actually having to sit down and invest time into reading like it's a task is so interesting as well, because I do have to do that.
Yes. And also even the physical act of, this sounds so pretentious, even the physical act of reading, of like trying to get comfortable, like how am I going to hold it, like it's a whole part of it, of like you're shifting over because your arm hurts, like it's like a labor, it's like a full like moment and like a movement and like state of being that like I really enjoy, that you don't really get with anything else. And I think reading a physical, I know a lot of people talk about this, but like reading a physical book rather than like a Kindle, for example, like I started reading War and Peace on the Kindle and it definitely has a different vibe than having like a massive novel in your hand, and it doesn't make it feel as real or as reverent.
I don't really think that Leo
Tolstoy
like, the 1860s had the idea of like, I wonder how people will consume my book. Will they consume it on a
slab,
on Jeff Bezos's technological slab? Like in what it's and also that is the biggest book ever.
Yeah.
Which I think is also a really interesting concept, because I read when I was 17. I read Stephen King's It on my Kindle.
Right.
And I thought it would be easier to read it on the Kindle, because I thought, it's not going to be as daunting to read a big book on a digital file, because I won't be able to see how much is left.
Yeah.
But then in reality, it was the exact opposite, because I kept thinking I'd read more than I had.
Yeah.
Whereas I couldn't physically look at how much I'd read. So I read and also the Kindle as well, the pages aren't accurate to what the actual print is.
Yes.
You think you've read more pages than you have, but like if the book's 700 pages in like physical format, it's like 1,500 on the Kindle.
I know. And the thing is, like, I remember I would just like I haven't finished War and Peace because of it, because I just started getting annoyed. I was like, oh, and like I knew it was a big book, but I was like, it just feels like even worse doing it on my like phone. And then I just think about times when like I was on a flight back from the States, and during the whole flight back I finished like front to cover Song of Achilles, and it just was like such like an experience of like reading this book that she took like I don't know, like 10 years to write, and I was on this super long flight and I was like turning the pages and crying. I'm like, the Kindle doesn't have the same vibe. The Kindle doesn't have the same vibe as crying real goblets of tears onto a paper copy.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? It also feels like you I don't know if you again, being type A personality, you probably feel the same way as me, but everything I do has to feel a bit like an accomplishment.
Yes, yeah.
So even because I need to feel like my existence is valid.
Yep.
So when I read a physical book, I'm like, okay, look at how much I have completed.
Yes,
Look
yep.
at this physical evidence of how much I have done today if I've read it all in one day, for example.
Yeah.
Whereas if I read it on a Kindle, it's like, well, what do I have to show for that?
Yeah.
Like, it's like 1 gigabyte file that now just like sits in the back of my Kindle. I mean, that being said, my Kindle is from 2012.
Yeah, me too.
I do think that mine maybe is a little bit kind of antiquated and does seem a little bit out of date.
Yeah, no, me too.
Maybe the new one's a bit more endearing.
I don't know.
But
I feel like you can't just get the vibe of like sitting in a public location with your finger like halfway through a book and everyone can see that you've been reading it. Like, you can't do that with a Kindle. Like, you can't just wave it around and show off silently.
This ties back to my starting point of, I think a lot of things like reading is just an opportunity to prove how intelligent you are.
Exactly.
Because I've definitely read books in the past that, I mean, they were good, but I definitely maybe only completed them because I wanted to be able to say, oh, well, I've read it.
Yes.
Whereas I think now I'm at a period in my life where I'm like, you know what? I don't want to read Hard Times. I don't want to read. I just don't want to read it. Everyone loves 1984 by George Orwell. I don't doubt that it's brilliant. I actually missed the train on that one. And you know what? I don't really need to read it. Yeah. I'm sure it's great. I don't need to know.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I want to read things I actually enjoy, not for the clout, but simultaneously, I do like being perceived as more intelligent than I am.
Yes, no, I'm 100% the same. I mean, like, all the books I've got now, and this is the thing, like, it's such a fun thing to do because you can really like dance between genres and like, you know, we've got memoirs, we've got fiction, we've got really silly, stupid books, we've got, you know, some really hard-hitting ones, and you can just so easily, like, I'm the type of person who, like, I read multiple books at the same time, and it really, like, engages my brain, and I can just kind of, it's just such a good feeling. I love it. And when it's raining outside...
it's good, and it definitely feels like, and it sounds so stupid and it's so obvious as well, because it's the exact same thing that everyone at school told me and my parents told me, was like, if you read, you will be smarter, which I think is obvious. You know, it's obvious because you're learning more words, you're learning how to communicate in a more effective way. But like, it literally seems a little bit like I don't know, like having a shot of vodka or something, in the sense that you feel it almost immediately sometimes. Yes. Like I'll read a book and I'll be like, oh, I immediately feel more like, you know, cognitively agile. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, oh, I feel wittier, I feel smarter, I feel more on my toes. Whereas when I'm just literally scrolling through and just like, you know, going through like Brittany Broski, as much as I love Brittany Broski, it gets to a point where it's like, oh my god, I need to like not have someone talking at me. I need to like kind of like consume something that's like not immediate in like a volume sense. You know what I mean?
Yes, exactly. And you know what? My topic, if you're ready to switch to mine,
I'm ready. Yeah,
it's quite relevant to this one. So I think we're intrinsically, psychically connected or something. Because
we're off to a good start.
We are. Because my topic for today is the idea of escapism and how you can get it differently, how different people get it, because you and I, we are friends, obviously, but we do have
quite... Are we?
Well,
I thought we were like media-based colleagues.
In love, married.
Sorry, we are married.
Yes, we are married. Yes, so escapism. You and I both have like very different interests sometimes when it comes to what we read or what we consume to escape. And it's just one of those things that I find really interesting, and like as a person, what you're seeking that's different to your life right now, because you and I have talked about like, daydreaming about being really famous. And things like that. So I personally, again, read loads of different types of genres, but I do tend to kind of gravitate towards like fantasy and that sort of thing, and I don't know if that's like a childhood thing, and I don't know why I prefer it over sci-fi. But how do you feel about escapism? How do you How do you engage with that, Ben?
Oh, that's so interesting. I mean, there's so many elements to escapism, isn't there, as well? Like, it's not as simple as that, oh, we only have one method of escapism.
Yep.
It's interesting how you're back to, like, talking about being a kid as well. I think, for myself, I mean, I found myself, the older I got, I think you got to go one way or the other. My escapism, some people, escapism is leaning back into when they were a kid,
Yep.
into their childhood. I think for others, it's the exact opposite. So I think, I mean, I have a few friends of mine. Shout out to Val. Val is very. We have discussed this as well. Like, I think even when I was a little kid, I always really looked forward to being an adult.
Yeah.
And so even for me, my escapism does lie in like very, typically mature or like adult leaning ideas. So like, I think in the same way, like I think people who fantasize about things like fantasy, sci-fi, these genres that are typically associated with more youthful audiences, tend to be people who are more nostalgic for their youth, perhaps. I mean, I might be wrong, I might not be, but I think I think for some people, I definitely feel like that way for some people, whereas myself, I've always been someone who's wanted to be independent and grown up, which is why I think things like Sex and the City are really integral to my escapism, which always comes back to that. Is that these people are like quintessentially kind of the balancing act. They're quintessentially a balancing act between being like young and youthful and silly and light and breezy, while simultaneously being adults who have their own money, who have their own ideas of maturity and have their own apartments. And it's obviously all, and that's fantasy and that's escapism, but it's still rooted in adulthood. So I don't know if that's a lot to go over, but
no, I think that really made me think for a moment, because I think the desire for escapism can come from like different things, because personally for me, I definitely think I have two modes, and one of them is, what if everything were completely different? Like, what if like we were in a completely different like planet, like like there's magic and things like that, or like I'm having an escapist fantasy about a future where I'm living in like a warehouse penthouse type situation. Like, I think for me those two different fantasies achieve different goals. I think the first one is more like to distract oneself from where you're at right now, or just to use your imagination to imagine a different world. But the second one is more maybe perhaps tinged with hope, and maybe more realistic in a way, and just more like, I don't know, like just the idea of sitting and watching comedies or sitcoms, or reading realistic, like realism books about like love and heartbreak and stuff like that, and engrossing yourself in that. I don't know, it's just really interesting that you seek a different thing depending on what fantasy you're focusing on.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Also, like, aren't we, to kind of separate the idea of fantasy so much from our own reality is kind of funny in itself, because like aren't we all like kind of living a version of our own little fantasy on our heads all the time? I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn and being like everyone's crazy and aren't we all? And then it turns out like, actually no, Ben, you're just completely nuts and you're living in your own mind. But I do think that we all just kind of create this version of the world around us that kind of works with what we need it to be. And I think like from especially our age as well, I think because there are so many opportunities ahead of us, I definitely find that my fantasies are much more rooted in like my aspirations, as opposed to like what's literally impossible. So like I think I'm not going to lie around like fantasizing about being like a mystical elf, because I'm not going to. I'm as endearing as that would be, and I think that's very, very fun. The odds of becoming a mystical elf seem very unlikely. Whereas and if I do become a mystical elf, then that is just brilliant. Like I will come back to you, and we can reassess. But it doesn't seem, even though obviously the likelihood of me being, interviewed on the Vanity Fair lie detector test is also very, very low. It's still physically in the realm of possibility.
It's more grounded.
So I think it's more grounded, but it's not grounded, is it? Because it's ridiculous. Because in what world am I going to be interviewed on the Vanity Fair lie detector test? But it's like I like to fantasize about these things because we're so young. I still have that idea in my head of like, oh, well, anything could happen. And that to me is the fantasy. It's like, oh, we've got so much time ahead of us and so many opportunities in front of us. Like, I wonder how I'll fantasize when I'm like 40. Will I be fantasizing about the past?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, like, oh, what could have happened if I hadn't meeting Zoe ruined my life and sent me down a downward spiral. What if I never started that podcast and got
yeah, exactly.
Stop wasting my time.
Oh, I really wish I hadn't, kicked Gorbachev in the face that time and started the Cold War. You know, like,
yeah, that's how.
all this kind of stuff. Like, it's like I think that are we just? But then maybe it just depends on the kind of person you are, because it's going to a different, not to completely veer off track, but I think for some people, like, these fantasies and dreams never end. It's just if you keep your life open to things being different, because obviously there's a whole element. I imagine, maybe again I'm projecting, but I imagine people who might have a more I don't know, not secure, but like traditional route in life, such as kids, family, yada yada yada. Things that limit your outward opportunities. That aren't bad things, obviously, to have kids and family, but obviously you can't then go running around the world and do random things if you have like a 3-year-old at home, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I wonder if people like that fantasize more or less. I don't know. It's interesting. But I want to know about your fantasies. What do you fantasize about? Tell me. I'm talking an awful lot.
No, you're not.
This is your section. Tell me what you're.
We're discussing. We're a meeting of the minds over this digital landscape.
You're so right.
I think for me, I spend a lot of time, because again, in real life, when I'm not fooling around and like I'm really focusing or working and stuff, like I get really focused, I work really hard, and when I do have the time to sit back, I'm like, I just imagine a world where I'm like, I just don't have to do any of that. And even if it's a silly, like, I'm an elf, even if it's something completely out of the realms, and I think I tend to go to those sillier, more like impossible, fantastic, and I think again it's because I used to love fantasy so much as a kid, and things like that. I think I might return to those more often when I'm like, the more stressed I am in real life, and then the more I feel like I have things together, I have more realistic fantasies, and I don't really not know why that happens. What do you think about that, Ben? What do you psychoanalyze?
I mean, it's I psychoanalyze you. Firstly, I find that really interesting, because I used to be really into fantasy stuff as well growing up. Like, I wasn't some sort of crazy pragmatist at like age 8 where I was like, oh, I only want to watch like real life dramas.
I could ridiculous. See that for you.
Like 8-year-old Ben like sat down watching like, I don't know, The Sopranos. Yeah. That wasn't gonna happen. But I loved like Star Wars and I loved Harry Potter, and I was obsessed with Lego and creating things. I think maybe I really don't know at what point those things shifted. I do think it has a lot to do with the social circle you are in as you grow up,
sure.
Which may sound a bit sweeping, because I am not a psychiatrist, so this is not me being like, I diagnose this as this. That's not true. But what I mean is, like, I can remember being very into fantasy stuff, into the more fantastical elements, until I became closer to a certain social group of people that wasn't really something that interested them.
Sure.
And then I think it depends on who you surround yourself with and what their interests are when you're growing up, because that kind of does form a massive part of your personality. Mm-hmm. So I don't really know where things became different, but I love that you're able to do that, because I guess maybe I'm a cynic. Maybe the problem is that I'm too cynical.
No, I think the thing is I'm an only child. I think that's
okay.
What's happening here. I think we've discovered the root of the issue.
Okay, great. We could diagnose you as spoiled.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think
spoiled and coddled. Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
yes. I think that's where we're at. I think we've found the root of the issue here. On that note.
No, yeah, okay, well,
yeah, I think perhaps at the end of each one of our podcasts, we realize something very fundamental about ourselves, or give each other a very deep cut truth until we inevitably have a big row on audio format.
Oh, that would be fun. A public, we fell out.
Yeah,
kind of video,
that could be our season finale.
That'd be fun. Like when people are like, oh, these YouTubers, we don't talk anymore. Bye, sister.
Yes. The day
I'm gonna do a Bye Sister about you.
The day I make a 2.5 hour long YouTube video about you, we will have peaked. We will have peaked.
Well, also the problem with that is you can't really get me on that one because I love the attention. So you're never gonna post that video. It's never gonna destroy me because I love to be talked about.
I'm not gonna destroy you. It's going to be a scheme. This is how we're going to get famous, Ben. We're gonna pretend to have a massive house. And then
I love that. Should we stage a massive argument?
Yeah.
And then everyone can be like, oh my god, they've fallen out, they're not friends anymore. And it can just, but also like, whilst we have no audience as well. So we can do it like, so whilst absolutely no one listens to this at all, we can do it next week. And we can each post a 2.5 hour video talking about how the other one upset me, and talk as if we're famous, talk as if anyone gives a fuck, and then maybe that will simultaneously make us famous.
Yeah, no one will see it coming. No one will hear this last bit of the episode. Everyone will have logged off by then.
No, they got bored around the 15-minute mark.
Yeah, they got bored when we started talking about turning into elves. So.
Exactly.
Well,
That
was our first episode. Look forward to our massive blowout online where we argue publicly.
I can't wait to air our dirty laundry, personally.
Me too.
I cannot wait.
Oh, yes.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. If there's any feedback as well on this, we obviously are very open to hearing your thoughts, and it might just be our friends and family listening to this, which is totally fine. But either way, we just want to know ways to improve and to make it more entertaining for you guys, and so just like get back to us in a nice and respectful way that doesn't make me really sad.
Yes, please do. We're just two people. Trying to put this podcast together without having done it before. So we're all learning, and any feedback would be very much appreciated. Again, just nice feedback.
Nice. Yeah, only compliments will be accepted.
Yes.
My ego is very fragile, so if you could not ruin me, that would be great. Thank you.
Exactly. Well, on that begging note, it's been a pleasure, Ben.
Yes.
It's been a huge pleasure.
It has been.
All right. See you next week then.
All right, goodbye everyone. See you next week. Bye.